Fellowship of the Broken, Making Sense of 12-Step Recovery by Angelo. Chapter 37, Step 5. Quote, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Close quote. Step 5 is where we share our inventory. Prior to this, our self-analysis has been a private matter, but now we need the courage to reveal ourselves to someone else. We will have to have complete trust in this individual and in the confidentiality of the process, otherwise we are prone to hold back. The wording of the step seems fairly obvious, but it's worth reviewing in detail in order to extract maximum understanding. The word admitted was used in step 1, and the meaning here is the same. The meaning is confessed to be true, and the implication is one of reluctant acknowledgement. The God word is used, but this time it's not qualified by the words as we understood him. This is as per the original drafting of the steps, although the words as we understood him were handwritten in for this step, but then crossed out again. The fact these words were excluded is very probably a matter of Bill Wilson's writing style, which tried to avoid too much repetition. Whatever the reason, the word God is just a word and is therefore always a placeholder for individual interpretation. The word ourselves has the same meaning as in step 4, which is the personal self of body and ego-mind. The words another human being obviously imply someone else. It's interesting for me that these specific words were used rather than simply using the words another person. I may be reading too much into this, but using the words human being can be seen to suggest that the chosen individual should at least have some awareness of being, as opposed to an exclusive identification with human. The reason for highlighting this is that the choice of individual will have an impact on the effectiveness of step 5, and hence we should ideally be choosing someone who is spiritually aware. The word exact means precise. Our inventory is not intended to be rough, approximate, indefinite or vague. We are looking at specific thoughts, feelings and behaviours, and we are admitting specified human traits. The word wrongs refers to our thoughts and behaviours, and the singular word wrong means not correct, not true, mistaken, in error, unsuitable, bad, abnormal, unjust, dishonest or immoral. Some of these meanings have a stronger flavour than others. My understanding is that the focus should be on admitting the mistakes we have made due to over-identification with the personal self, rather than going down the road of labelling ourselves as bad, abnormal or immoral. Step 5 then is a courageous act of opening ourselves up to another human being. It involves revealing specific details about ourselves in a way that perhaps we have never done before. The objective is to be analytical rather than judgmental. This is not intended to be an exercise in humiliation, nor does it need to be. Our confidant should ideally be spiritually aware and have experience of addiction. This is important because part of the purpose of step 5 is for our spiritual advisor to help us see aspects of the personal ego-mind that we may have missed or overlooked. The tendency of an addict is to be in denial of his or her own thoughts, feelings and behaviours, and an element of this denial may deliberately or inadvertently spill over into our personal inventory. An experienced advisor will be able to see hidden causes or motives that perhaps the addict cannot see. He or she is also likely to admit the same traits in themselves. A guide who is spiritually aware will be compassionate and non-judgmental. They will also understand the paramount importance of confidentiality. The other main purpose of Step 5 is to begin the process of self-healing. Many addicts have carried a heavy burden of guilt and shame for years prior to coming into recovery. This burden has literally dragged them down. The simple act of sharing this burden with a sympathetic and like-minded colleague can have a powerfully liberating effect. In this respect, the more revealing we can be, the greater the effect. It's said that our secrets keep us sick, and this is certainly true for addicts. Step 5 is an opportunity for us to share our secrets and thereby experience cleansing and healing. It is well worth taking this risk to be vulnerable, because the humility that results is priceless. If we are willing to put our refuse out for collection, then it will certainly be taken away. A literal understanding of Step 5 would be that we share our Step 4 with our sponsor, and thereby somehow also share it with ourselves and with the God Word, as we may or may not understand it. This may be a relatively quick process, or it may take several sessions, depending on the size of the Step 4 inventory. Our sponsor may point out some additional traits that might be uncomfortable to hear. We should experience some relief from having shared our brokenness, but this will depend upon the depth of our revelations. A deeper understanding of Step 5 will be that this is a life-changing opportunity to be totally honest about the inherently flawed nature of identifying only as a personal ego self. An honest self-appraisal will reveal all of the traits that are listed above. If we are in denial about any of them, then we are fooling ourselves. There will also be a recognition that the process of inventory must mean that there is a deeper sense of self that is able to observe the workings of the personal ego mind. This small detachment is the beginning of the journey towards abiding as consciousness, and also changes our self-perception. Once the self-centered nature of the personal mind is witnessed, then there is an increased willingness for change. The feedback from our sponsor will add to our understanding. The feeling of relief and cleansing will be tangible. By completing this step diligently, we may feel that we have reached a milestone and are firmly on the path to recovery. We may also find that we become more open and honest in our sharing at fellowship meetings. The next level of understanding involves including the God Word in our Step 5. Revealing our innermost selves to a trusted sponsor or spiritual advisor is one thing, but the step also requires us to admit these things to ourselves and to God as we understand Him. Once it's understood that consciousness is the creator, the substance, and the witness of all visible and non-visible manifestation, then this all becomes much clearer. Consciousness is not only the true nature of the apparent personal self, but it's also everything and everywhere and at every moment. The air that we breathe is consciousness. The chair that we're sitting on is consciousness. Our sponsor or spiritual advisor is consciousness. By sitting down and honestly revealing our thoughts, feelings and behaviours, we are literally sharing our inventory with consciousness, with ourselves, and with another human being. Consciousness in the form of the personal self is revealing itself to consciousness in the form of universal non-personal consciousness. It is also revealing itself to personal consciousness as itself, and finally to consciousness as expressed in the individual sponsor or spiritual advisor. The single revelation addresses the three apparently separate targets, which actually are one. The deepest level of understanding is that consciousness is revealing itself to itself in an act of self-recognition or self-realization. The shadow is seen to be just a shadow, and hence ultimately unreal. Once a shadow is understood to be a shadow, then it loses its previous power and influence. It will still be seen, of course, but it's seen to be an individual expression of consciousness created by the act of consciousness shining itself through a lens of consciousness. The effect is liberation from the bondage of the personal self, and it is the ultimate freedom. It is the true meaning of revelation. These understandings of non-duality will almost certainly only arise much later in recovery, but they're worth mentioning again here, because this does give significant credence to the wisdom contained in Step 5. At the end of the section in the book that covers Step 5, there's a paragraph that suggests that we pause at this point and reflect. We should review the work that we've done over the first 5 steps and satisfy ourselves that we've been honest and thorough. The implication here is that Step 5 is a turning point. However tempting it may be to cut corners or leave out particular issues, it's far better to leave no stone unturned. Our work on the steps does not have to be perfect, but it must be honest. If we cheat ourselves at this stage, then we will compromise the future quality of our recovery. Well, as with the first 4 steps, my experience of Step 5 at the time that I did it was in line with the first level of understanding, if that. I sat with my sponsor over 2 long sessions and read out my Step 4. Sometimes he would identify or offer some insight, but other times he would remain silent. Surprisingly, some of what I perceived to be the bigger items were met with silence, whereas some of the smaller, trivial items caused comment. I remember being tempted to skip over some of the more embarrassing parts, knowing that he could not see what I had written. Thankfully, I avoided this temptation. When we'd finished, we read the final paragraph noted above, and he suggested that I take a week to reflect and make sure I felt ready to proceed. This turned out to be the most important moment in my recovery. I knew that there were some shameful issues concerning my past behaviour that I had vowed would never see the light of day. The delay of a week gave me time to see the choice that I faced. I could either confess and hence be totally sure that I'd been honest and thorough, or I could say that there was nothing else to reveal. My sponsor did not know what was in my mind, so I could easily have chosen to keep it to myself. My fear was that I might relapse again if I did not reveal everything. Thankfully, the fear of relapse outweighed the fear of confession, so I updated my Step 4 and went through it with my sponsor the following week. The revelations were a non-event in the sense that my sponsor dismissed them as nothing. The secrets that I had buried for so long simply vanished. It was analogous to air bubbles being trapped in water and then rising to the surface and disappearing. As I drove home that evening, I experienced a sense of relief and exhilaration that I will never forget. I was just 6 months sober, and for the first time I really started to believe that the steps might actually work. Well, my understanding has grown significantly since that step 5 moment, and I certainly recommend taking a pause at this stage to reflect. The personal ego mind will try to protect itself by resisting scrupulous honesty, but the personal mind is the problem. We made a decision at step 3 to surrender the personal agenda in favour of recovery. This is the moment to override personal discomfort and be honest. It will turn out to be the best thing that we ever do. Once we are satisfied with the work so far, then we can proceed to step 6. If there is uncertainty, then we should backtrack and run through the steps again. Remember that each step builds upon the previous one. We may need to go back to the powerlessness of step 1 in order to find the willingness. The 12 steps are not a tick box exercise to complete as quickly as possible. Unnecessary delay is obviously to be avoided, but it's far better to be honest and thorough than quick.